Hi. Okay, so today I wanted to do kind of a quick live stream, but basically I wanted to go over the Google trial exhibit material because every time I go a little too long without doing that, I have a hard time remembering what had happened and getting back to covering it and all of that. Um, and so, yeah. So today, basically, we're going to continue our Google Trial Exhibit coverage. I always try to reiterate, if I can remember to, that there are two Google monopoly cases out there. One is related to search. The other is related to, it also involves search as it relates to search ads, but it's more focused on general the ad technology. And the search one also mentioned search ads. So they both mention search ads and are related to search ads, but one of the monopoly cases is more focused on the search engine itself, and the other one is more focused on the ad platform, and they are kind of tied together. But yeah, so basically though, we've been going through all of the trial exhibits for the search monopoly case, and we're going to get to the ad technology one next. But and I've covered both cases as it relates to news coverage, but in terms of reading the actual court material, I've only covered the search monopoly so far. And yeah, so we're going to keep going through our trial exhibits. If I've counted correctly, so far we have covered about 126 trial exhibits, and we got like 91 or so more to go. And so yeah, so I'm going to roll my intro. I'm going to recap last live stream. And then we're going to get through however many more feels right, because you never know with these things. And yeah, and then we'll just keep going. And before I do that, one thing that I've been processing also, like, is just how much of Google's marketing and sales plan and strategies and ideas have been made public that I bet they probably didn't want made public, because I'm wondering if they're losing leverage with their negotiation abilities, with how much of their emails have become public with their deal talking points for their strategies for how they got the deals they got with all of the negotiations they have made so far with these big business deals. So yeah, a lot of that has come to light, and I'm wondering now that a lot of these negotiation strategies are public, if other people will be able to call Google's bluff more. But at the same time, a lot that has been made public, which is also into evidence to prove how Google is a monopoly, shows how Google paid a lot of people so much money that they would lose money, so much money, if they stopped working with Google, that they kind of all decided that it was best to keep taking Google's money in a way. And so that's one of the way that competition was stifled in the market. And so, yeah, I also think that because of that, though, even if a lot of Google's negotiation leverage has been made public, because they've still kind of got them ball to balls, um, I feel like since they got them, it's just gonna be like, yeah, they're not gonna change, in my opinion, potentially much. Or I mean, maybe they will. Maybe there will be more room for other competition to come into the market, because Google perhaps could end up. I haven't looked into the remedies yet, so I don't know what happens. But if Google ends up being more restricted in some of their activities, then perhaps there could be more room in the market for competition to emerge. Well, there is competition technically, but I mean competition to compete more effectively emerging, perhaps, or something like that. You know what I mean? But yeah, fucking. But I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm just losing myself now. Okay, let's just keep going. We're gonna keep rolling my intro. Shit, I'm back again. Sorry, it's the ADHD. But I think also, like, how I'm processing all of this with the sales and the marketing strategies coming to light is, if you look at the timeline kind of history of these 100 trial exhibits that we've done. So the well, over 100 trial exhibits, but basically, uh, at first, a lot of it was related to explaining the technical side of search engine optimization, as well as the internal Google document side of how they discuss that they charge to run ads on the search network and things of that nature, and how they discuss how people running ads on the search network was a big way that they were then able to fund a lot of the other business deals they had. So that's how that all tied together there. And then they explained from there all of the different deals structures that have evolved over the year, and they really focused on the mobile application distribution agreement as well as the revenue share agreement. And these two agreements together kind of made it so that these platforms, like all these people doing business with Google, they had to have certain things downloaded from Google in order to get revenue. And they had to have Google at certain points either exclusive or just a default, depending, or maybe both, when it comes to the search access points for different ways you can search on the devices, basically in a nutshell, through all the different agreements they had. So they walked us through all the legalese and technicalities of that. And then since then, they've been kind of showing the emails and the communications and the meeting agendas and PowerPoints surrounding a lot of these conversations with how they locked each company into these agreements over the years. Also, they are showing internal communications between these companies, showing where these companies were saying they felt like they were going with Google because they had no choice, because they wouldn't be as successful because of the way this business model had evolved to where now they relied on Google. Or if they did go and do it without Google, they could still make it, but it was going to take severe hits. They would lose a lot of money and things of that nature. They would have to downsize before they could, and stuff like that. And so, and then we've also seen lately where Google was basically saying, they're going to play hardball with all of these negotiations. And we've seen where other of their people that they do business with, they were all trying to basically say in email communications and looking into other avenues of how could they do something that gets them away from Google's control by putting their resources into another platform that could effectively compete and provide some of those same alternatives. And in certain cases, they're basically saying, we don't know if we can do this at all because it's going to violate Google's agreements, and then we won't make any money with Google, and it will be in legal trouble. And some of it was like, well, we can get going, but it's going to cost so much money, and Google is so far ahead of us that it's basically going to be impossible to effectively ever compete with them, And so all of that together is how, that kind of got used to prove that Google is a monopoly, how all of those documentations came out. But that also shows Google's entire marketing and business strategy. And I think some of it, you can take what works for you and leave what doesn't. I think some of it, my mentor, he is 80 years old. He's also one of my clients, and he sold his real estate brokerage company for billions with a B. And he always tells me, you never want to lock people into a corner with a negotiation. It's got to be win-win, or it's not a good deal. You know what I'm saying? And that's how he does business. And I think that's how Google should be. Like, that's how I feel like if you move with that principle in business, because no matter what in business, other people are going to be trying to fuck you over. You could get fucked over no matter what, no matter if you're acting good faith or bad faith. But when you know you're acting in good faith in business, then I think the deals that you do have, they get based on long-term sustainability. And when you keep working together, it's beneficial. Versus when people go in mindset where they're going to go aggressive, they don't care if what the other side is, how the other side is affected, and they don't, you know what I mean? When they go into this mindset of it's just like win for them and they don't care about the other side, that's when you start putting yourself in situations where people will take your money, or people might work with you because they feel like they have to, but that's not cultivating a relationship, and you're not going to be their first choice. And any chance they get to do business outside of you, you're the last resort, not the first chance. And you know what I mean? And some people, the people that works for, it only works for them because of power dynamics. And is that the type of person you really want to be? But also long term, I feel like when people move in that mindset, if they're moving with a imbalanced power dynamic mindset, that's not in a state of ethics, in my opinion. And people who don't have ethics, like, yeah, the law is not morality because the law is immoral as fuck in a lot of cases. But I also see in a lot of situations where people who don't have a sense of their own ethics or hold to their own word, those are the same people who also do a lot of like, and there's a difference between doing illegal shit, you know, because it is benefiting you and you're taking advantage of the system versus like recognizing that something what the law is and not giving a fuck about what that law is because the law isn't moral. You know what I'm saying? So for example, I don't believe in ICE detainment. Sure, they are arguing that it's legal under the law. I disagree, but you know what? Semantics. Fuck it. But let's say theoretically they were right about the law. That does not mean it's moral, and I disagree, right? So in situations where people are helping people who came here without papers or whatever, because like no one gives a fuck if white people do it, but it's only a problem with people who are actually, you know, mostly of a lot of people who are actually indigenous to the Americas or indigenous descent are being impacted right now. But anybody who is, you know, dark skinned is being impacted in the United States by racism and ICE detainment right now, particularly. Well, a lot of racism and all this bullshit, not bullshit, but you know what I'm saying, like horrors and atrocities over times. I'm speaking to some particular surging in the issue we're seeing right now with ICE. Of course, that does not negate police brutality all the time, like period, against the black community and everything like that. All of it together. I actually believe it's tied because I believe in a lot of situations where we had a lot of people speaking out against police brutality and we had a lot of social awareness, that's where they started then going and leaning more towards ICE. Like they were building prisons to make money because they make money when the prisons are filled. So they're just trying to fill these buildings. You know what I mean? I'm going on this random tangent. I'm so sorry. Anyway, I'm over here like I'm gonna do a quick live stream and then do a fucking 20 fucking minute intro about a whole bunch of goddamn shit. What the fuck is wrong with me, man? I don't even know. But anyway, so yeah, I was thinking of the power dynamics with Google and how that just can lead to unethical shit. And I think that we are seeing their downfall because of that. Because, you know what I mean? Like, in all of these email communications that are being subpoenaed, everybody's kind of talking about how they're backed into a corner with Google, and that's the reason that they keep doing business with Google. Nobody, you know, in the communications are all like, yeah, Google's amazing. We love the way that this negotiation is working out for us. The only time, you know, in their internal communications, when we saw that occur would be external between the companies. So for example, whenever Apple was trying to get more information from Google, because Google had a lot of information about what Apple users were doing in Google search engines, which Apple is required to have Google for. So Apple wanted more information about what their users were doing, and basically they were like metaphorically sucking Google's dick, like, our partnership would be amazing. We just need to share more information together. We are in it for the long haul, like all of this shit, you know? And so, yeah, I just think like when we do see, like inwardly and externally, those are two different conversations. So I'd also say too, at the same time, in a lot of these negotiations that we are seeing, and some of them, the companies, for example, like Samsung, they're straight up like, nah, you're gonna give me more money if you want me to do this shit. You know what I mean? Like in the negotiations that we're seeing. But like in a lot of the negotiations, like with Apple, they're basically like, not in my opinion, from what I've seen in these trial exhibits, they're basically like to Google metaphorically sucking their dick, and then in the internal communications they're like, yeah, this shit is a problem, but then when it comes face to face to Google, they're like, yeah, we love you. You know what I mean? So I also think that part of the way that Google got like so big and everything would be like if Apple had had the balls to, you know, hold their ground with some of those negotiations, that they have enough leverage as a company that they could have at one point, I believe, perhaps really stifled Google, but instead I believe they chose the revenue from that instead of building their own system. Okay, I don't know. I'm just rambling way too much. Okay, we're gonna actually fucking get into this thing. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna roll my fucking intro thing, and then I'm gonna recap last live stream, and then maybe we'll get through some trial exhibits. Not bad. Hi, my name is Alexis, also known as Lexi or Deaf Child. I was born deaf, hard of hearing. I began doing business as Deaf Child 2013, marketing 2011, sales 2009. I've earned 50 plus certifications in marketing and sales. My Bachelor of Science from Loyola University, New Orleans, with a music industry studies major and a business administration minor. Deafness runs in my family genetically. Speech is not fully accessible to me. Anyway, I'm here to bitch about whatever the fuck is on my mind. So here we go. Visit my site at noladeafchild.com. My bad, I was texting. So, okay, let's recap. So far, I think we've done about 126 trial exhibits if I've counted correctly. I think we got about 91 more left to go or so. Last live stream, we did get through 6 trial exhibits, which theoretically you're like, yay, 6 trial exhibits, we cover a lot. But actually, like 3 or 4 of those things, mostly redacted. I don't know shit. But anyway, so, we looked at a heavily redacted email between Apple employees first. It was between Giannandrea and Tim Cook and Eddie Q and all of that. And so it's so redacted that I don't really know shit, but I know that the email was discussing displaced queries that Siri was trying to answer. I believe that could be in reference to, so if Google doesn't have an answer, for example, could Siri go to another search engine and get an answer from them? Something like that. I think that's what they were trying to talk about, if I'm not mistaken. But I could be wrong because that email is heavily redacted and I don't really have the context for shit. And the other thing that stood out to me in that email that's mostly redacted is they have a line in there about discussing privacy history. And so I also thought that was relevant because in previous live streams, we had seen where Google was competing with DuckDuckGo, and one of DuckDuckGo's main counterpoints against Google was their privacy and their data protection. And so then Google in their follow-up communication was basically like, we got to get on this privacy shit, kind of thing. Basically, if I understood all that correctly. But yeah. So, next email we looked at was an email between Eddie Q of Apple and Bill Stasier of Apple. So far, those first 2 emails were both internal Apple communications. So, this next one is also heavily redacted. Like, I don't know shit about the context of any of this because it's so fucking redacted. But the one line that stood out to me, and I don't even know if I processed this at the time last live stream, was they were saying it has a bullet point, and the only 3 words in this bullet point are next domain candidates. So from my understanding of a domain, typically in websites and web technology and marketing and online technology conversation, when you talk about your domain, you're talking about the URL people type to go to your website. That's the domain. Like, so for example, mine is noladeafchild.com. That's my domain. You know what I'm saying? And so I think I was wondering, like, from there if they were talking about like but they were talking about domain candidates. So I don't know if they're referring to like what, like, you know what I mean? But so that was 2014, and that was in context of that email conversation, but the previous one was 2019, so that was way later. So in 2014, they were talking about next domain candidates. I have no idea what that is in reference to, but it was just making me curious, like, at what concept around that time were they thinking about building out a website for? You know what I mean? But anyway, moving on. So then after that, we looked at, you guessed it, another heavily ass redacted fucking email. I don't know shit about what the fuck was happening in this email. This is another Apple internal communication, heavily redacted, between Bill Stasier and Eddie Q. And I don't know shit about what the fuck it is. But this one line that stood out to me was, it says, what are the future plans for search for the next year? And this was in 2014. And so then in that other communication, they also in 2014 around that same time they were talking about new domain candidates, but yeah, and so they were talking about what are the future plans for search for the next year, and they were also talking about Siri. And so I know that around between 2017 and 2019 is when Google really tightened up their negotiations and their agreements with Apple to basically say, like, we don't want Siri getting their search result from anyone else but us, basically, if I understood that correctly. And so before that took place, though, they were toying with like the idea of options from my understanding of what were they going to do with Siri, you know? So yeah, and then after that, we're back to Google communications. So we looked at an email between Google employees. This one's mostly between Christopher Lee and Jim Calatoros, but they were talking about a call. They're called deal talking points for Samsung revenue share agreement discussion points. And this was before the call. They sent an email over with like a PowerPoint about the deal structure negotiations and talking points, as well as a bullet list of like overturns and objections possibly in the conversation. You know what I'm saying? So talking points. So like if they threaten war, call their bluff, for example. Things of that nature were in there. And so they were basically saying all the ways that they were going to play hardball in their negotiation with Samsung, and basically utilize the revenue share as their weapon over them. And that was basically, in my opinion, like heavily paraphrasing and summarizing, that was kind of the point of that fucking email, if I understand correctly, And then after that, we looked at another email between Google employees. It's still got Jim Calatoros involved, but this one's involved with Rosie Lipscomb. And these were about the Samsung slides, but we don't get to see those attached slides, but we do get to see the email. And in there, they're basically talking about how they projected billions of dollars to flow through to Samsung, and that they were committed to investing in their partnership with them. Because and so I think this right here was potentially put into evidence to show the amount of money involved in these deals and why these companies wouldn't want to walk away from that. You know what I'm saying? If I understand that correctly, I could be wrong. And then we went over one more thing last time. Last but not least, we went over an email. This was between AT&T and Branch. So I don't know much about Branch, but from what I could tell from last live stream when I looked them up, they have to do with in-app search engine or something like that. I don't fucking know, something like that. But yeah, and then I don't even know if they're still around. But AT&T, the reason it's relevant, they do have their exclusivity agreements and their default agreements tied to the mobile application distribution agreement and revenue share and all of that with their AT&T devices tied to Google. So, they were emailing with Branch, and they were basically asking Branch, like, if we do business with you, would that fuck with our Google contracts? And can you list to us in all of the ways that you are different than Google so that we can discuss if this would, fuck with our ability to do business, if this would impact our contract. And so I don't believe that they ended up doing business together, and I do believe that that email chain could have potentially been put into evidence just to kind of show, like, see, look, here's another example of Google monopolizing the market. Like, other people couldn't even do business because of Google. You know what I'm saying? That's why I'm assuming that they put that in there. So yeah, so that sums up our recap. And so now, that was a recap from last live stream. So now we're just going to keep going. I never know how many we're going to do until we get here because, you never know how long. Okay, so basically though, text message, sorry. All right. So we're going to look at exhibit UPX 0659. And this is an email from Giannandrea of Apple to Jenna Thibodeau of Apple. And it's a reply about follow-up questions to the SPG and AI ML all hands. Honestly, can't think of what the fuck SPG means off the top of my head, but AI is artificial intelligence, AI, and ML is machine learning. And so this says it's from November 17th, 2020. It was filed November 8th, 2023. Okay. So, John had just said thanks, and before that, Jenna had wrote to John, thanks. The AIML questions have been answered in Slack, and I've sent Doug a note with the SPG questions, replying regarding how he would like to handle. From Jenna, and then before that, John had written, here are my answers. We should check with Doug. If he wants me answering these kinds of sensitive questions without him and whatever, it says Focum? Huh, I've never fucking heard that word before. Jesus Christ. It sounds too much like Secrum or some shit. I don't know, or fecal. You're going to use. Anyway, so in whatever Focum you are going to use or some shit. Okay, and then it's redacted. But what's not redacted here is part of item number 3. It says in terms of whatever the fuck that is redacted. Then it says, are we trying to seriously compete with Google? From Sean Lee. Jenna note, can send to Benoit or Chinu as well, but thought you may want to throw some thoughts on this one. And so these are Apple employees. So right here, they're asking, are we seriously going to compete with Google? Okay. And then it says we front all information on queries, including, oh wait, there's no on, what the fuck? It says we front all information queries, including all those that eventually go to a search partner. And then it says we, and then it says redacted. And then it says road knowledge is critically important to us as a company, which is why we are investing. And then a lot of this is redacted here. Okay. So this is 2020. In 2020, they were discussing, they asked a question of if they were going to seriously compete with Google, but we know that previously they have discussed the concept of if they could or would or wanted to. And I believe they did want to, but decided that it wouldn't be profitable. But here they're saying, are we going to compete with Google? And then below that, road knowledge is critically important to us as a company, which is why we are investing. So I believe that would be, yeah, in my understanding. Now let's see if we can find out what the fuck SPG means. I don't know. None of this looks right to me. Yeah, I have no fucking clue. None of that looks right. Anyway, so yeah, let's move on. Next up, we got Exhibit UPX 0663, and this is a chat between Patrick Chang of Samsung and Jeff Chen of Samsung. And this is from July 28, 2020, and it was filed October 6, 2023. Okay, now I actually got something to read this time. Okay, so it's to Jeff Chen as well as Patrick Chang, and the other Samsung employees here are redacted. And so Patrick Chang had said, Emily mentioned she brought it up during the direct. This was shot down. But I believe we needed Dee's intervention here since this is ultra time sensitive. When Jim was here in the last negotiations, he carved out for me branch in-app content search. The current agreement is looking like Google will own all search on device. Samsung is allowed to do search as long as it doesn't connect to the internet or ping a server. Only look at things on device such as messages, settings, etc. This will completely kill all potential for any branch search and other future services. I think this is imperative that Dee talks to Patrick, Chomei, and Jay Kim about seeing if they can carve something out for branch. They're doing it for redacted. India has the opportunity to generate redacted in year 1 and us minimum of redacted. I don't know. I think that part of this right here would be like just a language barrier, but then the other part would be the redaction as well. I think those two combined, I'm not processing. Anyway, it says, we believe this can be close to redacted annually, but all this will be killed if this Google agreement happens. And then Patrick has said, the agreement is finalizing by August 1st. Jeff said, Emily brought up at the directs. And then D is spelled D-E, so I don't know what they're referencing here, but yeah. Anyway, and then Patrick had said, she said she did, maybe she didn't. Jeff said, is this about Branch or in general a bad idea? Patrick said, bad for Branch and bad in general. And whatever Patrick said next, two things are redacted, but then Jeff said, so if you guys feel strongly, Emily or Brendan and you, or just you, should bring this up to David if you feel strongly about this. Jeff also said, in the end, he'll ask you guys the questions for details, so no use in me being the middleman. Unless Brendan and Emily disagree with you? And Patrick said, yeah, Emily agreed this is a D. So I don't know, they keep putting DE, so I don't know what that stands for. Still trying to get Brendan on the same page. He's been MIA as Harry and I have been trying to sound the alarms. This agreement is becoming finalized in a few days. But then Jeff said, I'll say this. I don't recall this ever being brought up. So I am happy to start a chat with you, Emily, and Brandon, saying that if you all feel strongly, then bring it up with David and force the issue. In the end, if you feel so strongly, you should feel free to go to David as well. You know that. Especially if this is a bigger picture than Branch. Saw the email chain you added me to. I pinged Emily and Brandon separately asking what they want to do. And then Patrick said, okay. And then Jeff said, I still think the positioning is more about what's right for Samsung, not necessarily for Branch deal. So, in greater context to this conversation, I don't know what they're referring to in terms of the positioning or bringing it to somebody else. So they're basically saying, you know, because I don't know the specific deal that they're referring to, because they're talking about how an agreement is being finalized, that the Google agreement will be killed. Okay, now I'm processing. So what I think they are saying here is that they were in conversation with doing a deal with Branch, just like AT&T was. But if the Google agreement moves forward, continues moving forward as is, they would not legally be allowed to do business with Branch. And so, in this conversation, one Samsung employee was basically telling another, like, we're not going to be able to do shit with Branch if this Google deal goes forward. It's going to kill everything. And so this other guy was basically like, well, I mean, I support you speaking out on it. I don't know. I don't think I can do anything, but like, you should go talk to this other dude, because, you know, that's the guy who you might want to fucking talk to if you feel like you should talk to somebody. I don't know. Basically, in a nutshell. So yeah. Okay. And then after that, we've got exhibit UPX0664. Let's see if I can do one or two more. And this is an email from Sarika Mittal. I am so sorry. I believe I'm saying that definitely probably wrong. Of Google to Kesh Patel of Google. And it's a reply about AT&T and Branch discussion. Oh, we're back here. From June 9th, 2020. And this is filed September 27th, 2023. Okay. So sorry, Miss Sarika. I'm definitely positive. I'm sorry, I'm saying your name wrong. And Kesh, we got this is an email between them about the AT&T Branch. We've also got Marie Mackey CC'd here, and these are all Google employees. So, Sarika had said thanks to Kesh, and before that, Kesh had said, you were copied on my note to Eli. Let's see how they respond. In summary, we will be pushing all U.S. carriers to clearly meet the alternative search service requirement. Really focus on on-device search versus pulling off-device content. And then before that, Sarika had said, hi Kesh, Mary, is it Mary or Mari? I've heard people like spell that name. I've seen people spell that name, but then heard them say it Mari or Mary. So I really don't know which way this lady goes, but I'm gonna go with But you know what? Now I'm reading below. I think her full name is Marie. That might have been a typo. So I'm going to go with Marie. Hi, Kesh. Hi, Marie. Sorry, I'm catching up on email. In case the meeting has not happened, can you please add me? If it has, please loop me into any subsequent syncs. Do we have any next steps outlined? Best, Sarika. And then Marie had written, thanks to those who shared the screenshots. I'm taking a look at them. Also, Kesh is setting up a call with a subset of this group for this afternoon to discuss the screenshots. If you'd like to participate, please let him or me know. Best, Marie. Before that, Ji-Young Lee had written screenshots from US Open. I think this is Verizon Wireless. It says VZW, AT&T, and then it says TMO. I think that's T-Mobile. And then it says SPR. I think that's Sprint, but maybe I'm wrong. Are captured in the shared doc. And then it says results from the United States Open SKU show the configuration with Samsung's revenue share client ID. Do we want to check non-United States SKUs as well, such as the European Open SKU targeting the Europe and Eastern Asia, I think, region, if I'm not mistaken. Or, wait, why do I always forget? I can never fucking remember what the fuck EEA stands for, y'all. Oh, okay, it just means European Economic Area. My bad, I get all those acronyms confused. Another one of those is like, whatever. Anyway, so, and then before that, Anna Kartasheva of Google had written, that's right, thank you, Jim, Chris, and Ji-Young are leading that. Thank you. And before that, Jim Calaturos had said, anything specific for me or my team to do on this? Is it to check the contract or revenue share agreement and confirm with Samsung whether this is global? Thanks. And she had said that's right. And so before that, Ji-Young had written, we need to visit the office. Planned early next week. Is Tuesday late for you? And then Kesh had said before, thanks Ji-Young, can you help prioritize the AT&T screenshots? I want to make sure our thinking is correct before I get back to them on a recommendation. And then Ji-Young had added Ryan Barnett and said FYI. And before that, Ji-Young had said, here are screenshots from Samsung United States SKUs. We have T-Mobile and United States Open so far. We may go for other United States carriers by Tuesday next week. Note, United States Open SKU clearly indicates use of the technology. Both the United States Open and the T-Mobile SKU shows internet-based search results. On Thursday, June 4th, 2020, at 1:04 p.m., oh shit, my bad. I was just keeping reading, man. My bad. I don't need to be reading all that. But before that, Anna had written that it was privileged and for Kate and Rosie to please advise. It says to summarize this thread for new people. We have discovered that Samsung Finder in its current implementation, incorporating Branch IO API, does appear to conduct off-device web search across multiple apps, which conflicts with our definition of the alternative search. Example, when we search for pizza, we see results from Netflix, Pinterest, Yelp, Galaxy Store, Play Store, other third-party apps, etc. when the Samsung phone has connectivity. All these results disappear when we search for pizza in airplane mode, when it does truly conduct on-device search only, showing results from contacts, gallery, etc. Provided that AT&T communicated that this is done by Samsung on all United States carrier devices, possibly on open market devices too. And TBC, if this is also happening globally. I think they mean to be continued. I don't know. We agreed on the following next steps. 1. With all United States Canada carriers, confirm that other carriers have language. They should. That gives us ability to ask them to discontinue this practice. And if so, we would need to work with them on removing this functionality. And they tag Adrian McAllister and Kate Lee, FYI. Number 2. With Samsung, confirm if they are doing it globally and check what our alternative search definition allows us to do or whether it is a breach. Tagging Jim Calatoros, FYI. And 3, with AT&T. Kesh is owning the outreach to AT&T specifically to get this resolved. Please let me know if this makes sense. Thank you, Anna. And before that, I definitely cannot say this correctly, but Bonsak An had written, no, I was not aware of it. And before that, Giannandrea had said, it's new to me too. And previously, Sarika had said, she tagged Carol Lynn and Matt Schwartz and said T-Mobile, Verizon, BDs right here. I guess they mean business development. I don't know. And then tagging AT&T Android support, and it says FYI. It says Kesh and I met with Chris Lee today, and he said he can check whether SS has this technology across carriers. I don't know what SS means for sure here. I'm wondering if they mean Samsung, but I could be wrong. And then it says Kesh, is tomorrow's meeting to determine our internal position in line with AT&T's and other carriers' contract, given we know the technology does a deep link into apps and could potentially impact internet searches. And then it tagged Jiyoung Lee and Bonsak. I am so sorry, I'm definitely saying that wrong. Are you aware of Branch's technology being part of S-Finder across carrier devices? So yeah, and then S-Finder is related to Samsung in terms of finding information in your Samsung devices, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah. So now we have additional info from AT&T. Samsung informed us that the feature has been turned on in the Finder app on Samsung devices sold by T-Mobile, Verizon, and Sprint, and that it wants to make the functionality standard across all of Samsung's upcoming devices, including those distributed by AT&T. AT&T is considering working directly with Branch, ideally standardizing and bettering the below user experience across various operating equipment manufacturers and to return more relevant results. Branch may have deep links to various places within the Pizza Hut app or other relevant apps, and evolving the below in-app search directly with Branch instead of seeing just the Pizza Hut app icon below. A drop-down of results from the Finder search menu might show 5 different results for different places within the Pizza Hut app for the user to better access the relevant part of the app. A hypothetical example might be a deep link directly to the menu page within the app. Branch draws from its index or database of deep links into apps. Branch does not do an internet search on pizza to return results to websites. We have confirmed with Branch that it doesn't return internet search results and that it draws from its own index or database of deep links. And then it looks like this is redacted here or something, or maybe it just didn't format right for us. Either way, I don't know. And then Anna had said before that, probably asking Samsung or asking Carol or Matt. And previously, Kesh had said Chris will join. However, he does not know much about Branch, but he can take questions to SS. I still don't know if that means Samsung or not. It could mean something else. This says, in the meantime, what's the best way to understand if Verizon, Sprint, or T-Mobile have this enabled on Samsung Finder? Anna has said before that, I think without Chris, it is hard to get a resolution here. Can we add him or find time that works for him too? And it looks like an agenda here for an AT&T Branch discussion for Thursday, June 4th, 2020, between 10 and 10:30 a.m. if that matters, with a Google Meet link. Yeah. And then it says, it seems to have a list of attendees here. So it's got Kesh Patel, Marie Mackey, Anna Kartasheva, and Sarika Mittal. I think I'm saying all your names wrong. Sorry, guys. Well, maybe I got Marie's right. And then it says AT&T or Branch Technology. I think this might be a link, I can't tell, from June 1st, 20 or something like that is underlined and written here. And then it says, please review attached doc. Yeah, that was a link, I guess. We may have latest email from AT&T and screenshot. Also, Chris Lee is not aware of okay, at first I thought I zoomed in too much, but it looks like no, it's just cut off. So this email is also partly cut off, so I don't know what Chris Lee is not aware of, but he's not aware of something. And then it says, we'll ask SS at the high level, but may not know anything soon. Then it's redacted here, little redactions, more redaction. Oh, I think that's it. Okay, so that was a lot to process. Yeah, we've had worse. Anyway, so, from my understanding, they're basically being like, look, these people are trying to do business with Branch, and we can't have any of that, so let's put a stop to that pronto. And they were literally planning, like, immediate, like, you know, like you work with AT&T, you work with Samsung, like you work with this motherfucker, like all you bitches, go to your bitches, let them know they can't do this shit. Everybody stop their people from doing this shit. You know what I mean? Like, so they got all the representatives, got legal on, got everybody on. They were like, none of that. None of that. Fuck that shit. Fuck that shit. No competition. So that's why that's in evidence, because that seems to be like, you know, pretty explicit evidence of Google employees actively, you know, trying to prevent other people from effectively competing with them in the market, in my opinion. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I think I got time for one more, and then I might need to wrap this bitch up. But I love how I'm doing a live stream where I spent half of the time talking about a bunch of random other shit. Anyway, so now we've got exhibit UPX0670. And this is an email from Joan Braddi of Google to Sundar Pichai of Google and others. And it seems to be forwarding another forwarding thing about extension term length. And this is from June 8th, 2007. And it was filed October 12th, 2023. Okay. So, from Joan Braddi to Jeff Sardell and Sundar Pichai of Google. Let's see. And it says, Jeff, please ensure the language is clear. It says WRT. I don't know if that was a typo or what the fuck that means. Is clear something default. Ensure there are not two versions of the browser, for example. It est, or that is, an option with Y to get around the default and payment issue. Talk to me for more details, but we need this covered in the extension for protection, as Apple has not been clear with their strategy, and we are afraid they will cover their choice option, which nets no payment from us in a form that looks like default but is really choice. Joan. And so I don't know if she's explicitly saying it, or if she is like or not, or if it's like she is implying it or not, or if it's just me interpreting it this way, but I feel like she's basically trying to say Apple's trying to do some fuck shit by claiming that we're the default when we're not, so they still get paid when they shouldn't. Maybe I'm wrong for thinking that from this wording, but that did cross my mind. So anyway, from there, before that, Sundar had said to Joan, and he had CC'd some people. He had CC'd Omid Kordestani, Sergey Brin, Jeff Sardell, Eric Schmidt, Jonathan Rosenberg, and Marissa Meyer. I don't know how to say y'all's names. Sorry, guys. And this was the subject, a reply about forwarding extension term length. And it says, this is great. Thanks, Sergey, Joan, and Omid. I will work with the team to make sure we get good data here on Windows Safari, and we should re-engage them well in advance before the term expires, so that we have more time next round. And that was from Sundar. And before that, Joan had said, Sergey, looks like your email hit the spot. Well done. Apple has accepted the terms we proposed earlier this week, which were very generous from Google to begin with. Jeff, can you please drive the amendment process for this extension? Joan. So yeah. And before that, Philip Schiller had said to Joan Braddi, a reply about the extension term length still. Hi, Joan. We will move forward to extend the deal. Oh my God. Okay, so Philip Schiller. So previously, let's process this here correctly. On the communication in this email chain previously had been with Google employees. Now, Philip Schiller is an Apple employee to Joan of Google. So this is from Apple to Google here. It says, "Hi Joan, we will move forward to extend the deal with the terms you proposed. I will ask our team to work on a draft amendment. The easiest way that I see to do this is with a redacted extension to the entire deal and then the additional times just for Mac and iPhone. Thanks, Bill." Before that, Joan Braddi had written, "Bill, in our effort to bridge the gap in term length extension desired by Apple, we wish to propose the following. Mac Safari browser, Google as default search provider, extended term length by redacted from current term until redacted 2009. iPhone search, Google as default search provider, term redacted 2010. Windows Safari browser, Google as default search provider, test period, redacted 2007 or until redacted 2008. Google and Apple will work together to figure out how incremental value is measured based on data collected from Windows browser. Bill, Google is very interested in extending our working relationship with Apple. We could have done this better if we had more time and not just a few days to consider the extension and the added products. This extension gives us another redacted months with our current Mac Safari relationship, adds the iPhone to the scope of the agreement, and for a term of redacted years from now, and gives us both 1 year to test the Windows browser for Apple users. Please call me if you have any questions. Best regards, Joan." And yeah, looks like that's it. So, basically, at this point, this is back in 2007 now. So Google is still, at this point, they did have a lot of business dealings with Apple, but they hadn't fully become so, Apple and Google weren't as intertwined then yet as they are now. This is like the beginning of how they became intertwined. You know what I'm saying? And so they're basically, in terms of securing those exclusions, here they were negotiating a time length, an extension on the term length, which would be in the time period, how much longer that they could secure these placements, if I understand correctly. And so, yeah. And so so basically, originally Joan had said to Phil, "Hey, we want to extend our term for all of these platforms for this time period." And then Phil had said, "I'm going to ask the team. I think the easiest way we could do it is just say, let's extend the whole deal, and then we can add additional times for these specific devices." And then they were basically, so that was what we saw between Apple and Google. And then the rest of the conversation was between Google and Google employees. And they were basically saying that they were giving them a very generous deal. So this shows to me that, because Google is giving so much money, Google sees that the amount of money that they give in the revenue share agreement as a form of generosity, even if they are acknowledging how these agreements how they are locking them in with these agreements. As we saw in that previous email chain where they were basically like, we can't have anybody competing against us. The agreement says no. You know what I mean? So yeah. But basically, they're saying we're going to re-engage them, because they were saying that also in the email chain that they wish they had more time to negotiate with them. So next time they were going to re-engage in advance so they have more time. So yeah. But also, I don't know if I interpreted this part correctly, but they were basically saying, Apple has not been clear with their strategy, and we are afraid they will cover their choice option, which nets no payment from us, in a form that looks like default but is really choice. So, we're saying looks like default. If it looks like default and they are presenting it as default, then Apple would be getting paid, right? But if it's actually choice, then they shouldn't be getting paid. So where they're saying we're afraid that they will cover their choice in a form that looks like default but is really choice, that makes it seem as if they don't believe that Apple is acting in good faith in their dealings with them. You know what I'm saying? So even back in 2007, they were like, we got to watch out for these competitors now. You know what I mean? Like, it looked like there wasn't trust in these deals even back then, if I understand correctly. So yeah. So just to recap, let's see. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we now have done 130 trial exhibits. I think if we started at 126, if I remember that correctly, then let me check that real quick. If we started at 126, let me see. Yeah, so we've done 130. We covered 4 today. And I think we got 87 left to go, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, so we've covered 130 trial exhibits. That's a lot. So today we did 4. And just to recap those 4 trial exhibits, the first one we looked at was just a 2-page email. It was between Apple employees. It was between Giannandrea of Apple and Jenna Thibodeau of Apple. I still don't know what the fuck SPG means, but they were saying it's follow-up questions to SPG, whatever the fuck that is, and AIML. AI is artificial intelligence, as you know. ML is machine learning. And basically that they were saying, they were asking if they were seriously going to compete with Google. And so, yeah. And then they asked a question, are we trying to compete with Google? And then what I perceive as a possible answer to that question below, it says, role knowledge is critically important to us as a company, which is why we are investing. So this is from 2020. So I do believe, if I understand correctly, Apple is discussing the possibility as of 2020 of if they could effectively compete with Google, and beginning that process. I haven't fully processed why this portion right here is into evidence, but in a lot of these situations, the previous trial exhibits explain later trial exhibits. So I'm wondering if we will see more about how that ties in as we keep going. So yeah, and then after that, we looked at a chat between Samsung employees, Patrick Chang and Jeff Chen. And this is also from 2020. And here, they were discussing about whether or not they could use branch. And they were discussing whether or not this would be possible because they believe that the Google agreement that they were moving forward with, that was going to happen, that was getting finalized in the next month, was going to kill the current negotiation and deal and work that they had done with Branch. And so that's what that whole conversation was about in 2020. And then after that, we looked at a different conversation between Google employees, and this was also related to Branch. And they mostly focused on AT&T, but they also talked about, if I understand correctly, Samsung and and Verizon and T-Mobile and Sprint and all of these people. And they're basically putting together a plan like, so these people are trying to do business with Branch, and they were creating a plan, an agenda, and a structure, and assigning each representative for each relevant company to go back to those companies and tell them they cannot do business with Branch because it violates their agreement with Google, if I understood all of that correctly. And that was also from June 2020. So yeah. And then after that, we looked at the last thing, a pretty long email conversation between Google employees. But it was basically about extending the term length between their Google deals between Apple and Google. I'm not processing correctly. So Apple was basically agreeing to extend the term of revenue share agreement for default search placements in 2007 with Google. And this was the very beginning of how they kind of got locked into these really, really tight negotiations and agreements. But yeah, basically, this is kind of showing the beginning emails from 2007, some of the earlier agreements that they had. I mean, obviously, they've been doing business together, I think, since the 90s, if I'm not mistaken. But I think around 2007 is, and the early 2000s is when we see the exclusions and the default placements really come into play, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, we got an email chain about that. And in that email chain, not only did we see Philip of Apple agree with Google, to move forward with the Google deals on Apple's behalf, but we also then saw in follow-up conversation between Google employees that they needed to make sure that they were giving themselves more time to renegotiate these deals in advance, so that way they could have more leverage, if I'm understanding correctly. And I believe that they were also in their internal emails expressing doubts about if Apple was doing business in good faith with them, or if they were trying to still profit off of their revenue share while not following through on some of the default placement agreement aspects of their deal, if I'm understanding that correctly. But maybe I didn't get that right. But yeah, so that puts us here now. And today, I rambled a bit more than I planned to at the beginning here, but I'm kind of glad I did, because like in my processing, about like sales and marketing, whether it's digital, whether it's face to face, when you're selling and you're doing marketing, you're often exposed to various mindsets in business, and I think a lot of how you do business can be cultivated by the people you choose to get into business with. I think when you're in business with certain people, you end up with their mindset and acting in accordance with them to maintain those business relationships. So I also feel like this is a good case study for everybody to reflect on. At what point do you need to move away from doing business with someone just to have a business deal and start focusing on what's going to be sustainable long term, where everybody's going to genuinely be able to move forward in a productive way, right? And to a point, there is, like, in business we talk a lot about long-term sustainability, but on certain levels there is no such thing. There's always going to be natural disasters. There's always going to be economic instability, right? And things of that nature. There is no such thing necessarily. I think a lot of times people start business because we don't feel stable in our 9 to 5 lives, but or 8 to 5 these days. Shit, man, your fucking job's like 8 to 5 now. What the fuck? Anyway, but I think a lot of people, they start businesses because they feel unstable and they are looking for stability, and then they freak out and they lose their business real fast and they go back to working, not because they couldn't make it, but because they don't process how unstable it is to be a business owner. When you work for someone else, you know exactly how much money you're going to make, you know exactly when it's coming, but versus when you own your own business, it's up to you, and so I think when you reflect on that, how that kind of mindset puts you into certain situations as a business owner, but also with anyone in sales and marketing in a way. Because in the corporate world, you get fired, you can get fired, you can lose your job, you can get laid off so quick, It's like people are either there 20 years or it's like a 1 year, every year you get a new job kind of thing, one or the other, I feel, is what I see in a lot of situations. But the people who last in corporate for 10, 20 years, a lot of them, when you actually start talking to them, they're going to quote unquote drink the Kool-Aid and be like, I love this place publicly at all times of the day, because they're going to secure their money and are not about to publicly reflect any form of doubt that could take away their source of income. But if you actually start talking to them privately and you get to know what is their life like a lot of people who are staying with these jobs for 10, 20, 30 years, they're fucking miserable. Some of them are wanting to kill themselves, like literally. And, and the only reason they're at the job is because they don't think they could get another for one reason or the other, So, like, I know some people who, they are in corporate executive leadership positions, but they've been at that one company for 20 years, and they feel because they have no degree and because they've been at this company for this long that this is the only place that they're going to get that level of title at. They don't believe in themselves and their ability to get that title at another location because of the competition and because of things of that nature. Like, we see things like that a lot now. A lot of people, they will stay somewhere that isn't good for them because they're afraid of their ability to make it somewhere else. And I think that's what we can kind of see a lot in these Google relationships and these Google business negotiations. And I think that's also where we see none of these people trust each other in these communications. They're all looking for the most money right now, as well as how to get out of the leverage of feeling like they're controlled by someone else for money. You can see that a lot from my understanding in these communications. But yeah, that's just kind of what I'm processing right now. I don't know. I feel like I haven't processed it enough to articulate that clearly, but I don't know. We're processing. So yeah, thank you for your time today. I appreciate you. Thanks for joining me. I will do another live stream whenever the fuck it feels right. I appreciate you being here. Hope everything works out for everybody. And I'll timestamp this bitch as soon as I can. Bye. Thanks for watching. Join the loyalty program at noladeafchild.com/loyalty and check in during live streams to get points for rewards.